This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's June 14th, 2021. I'm Ross John Fortuné. There are more than 6 million people who invest with a thrift savings plan and expect that plan to be a stable, well-managed fund. The TSP has assets worth over $500 billion administered by professional civil servants employed by the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board. But as all feds know, nothing is that simple when it comes to the political wranglings around federal employees' lives. Since the International Fund became more comprehensive in 2017, members of Congress have used it to make political points about China. Most recently, Senator Tommy Tuberville introduced a bill to block the agency that administers the thrift savings plan from allowing participants to invest in a broader international index that includes Chinese corporations. Tuberville defended the plan to Yahoo Finance in a discussion in May.
Here's the thing that we need to do. We need to show the corporations, this company, listen, we are doing the things that we need to do. You need to help us slow China down in terms of their economy and their military. So prohibiting the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan Investment in China Act, is very important.
Congress is not the only place where the TSP's investments have seen meddling. A new executive order from the White House aimed at incorporating, quote, climate-related financial risk into federal budgeting also instructs officials to review how the TSP considers risks from climate change in its decision-making. This could narrow the places the TSP invests, potentially restricting fossil fuel companies. Similar plans have been introduced in Congress, but none have advanced. Dallin Hawes is a financial planner and host of the Plan Your Federal Benefits YouTube channel, as well as a podcast at planyourfederalbenefits.com. He is also the author of Building Wealth in the TSP, Your Roadmap to Financial Freedom as a FERS Employee. After a short break, he'll join me to assess how the political wrangling around the TSP will affect feds who are invested in the plan. The most anticipated defense event is coming up this June. In its 6th year, the annual Defense One Tech Summit will explore the future of emerging technologies and their likely impact on the national security tactics and strategies of tomorrow. Don't miss your chance to hear from defense technology and artificial intelligence experts. Tune in from June 21st through the 25th. For more details on the week-long summit, visit defenseone.com/events. That's defenseone.com/events. The thrift savings plan is aggressively apolitical, but that may be changing. President Joe Biden signed a recent executive order aimed at ensuring federal agencies consider the risks of climate change in their budgeting, which could change the way the TSP invests. Similarly, members of Congress have targeted China-based funds in the I Fund as something to be removed from the fund's portfolio as a way for the U.S. to make a geopolitical point. Dallin Hawes is a financial planner and host of the Plan Your Federal Benefits YouTube channel, as well as a podcast at planyourfederalbenefits.com. He's also author of the book, Building Wealth in the TSP, Your Roadmap to Financial Freedom as a FERS Employee. He joins me now to talk about the recent political wrangling around the TSP and what Fed should do, if anything, about it. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ross. It's always great to be here.
I guess the first question that everyone who listens to our show that is involved with the TSP is wondering is this. All this political wrangling, what does it mean for people who are invested in the TSP?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? I mean, there's so much talk, there's so many pages and pages of these bills, all these things. It's hard to kind of, okay, what does this mean for the average federal employee? That where do they put their money, right? Where do they save? And I think with the two core issues that you mentioned is, okay, first, they're looking at fossil fuels, taking care of their environment as well as China. If we kind of break those two apart, I think that there's lots of different talk of, okay, if they're going to maybe exclude fossil fuel company stocks from, let's say, the TSP, pension funds. There's a couple ways they're going to do it. First, they may just take the options out of the TSP, and TSP participants won't have access to those funds. If I had to guess, I'd say that's unlikely. If I had to guess, it could happen. Right now, fossil fuel companies are about 5 to 6% of the S&P 500, which is the C fund, right, in the TSP. So it's a good chunk. And I guess the next question that people in the TSP are going to ask is, hey, if they take those stocks out, is that going to affect what the C fund does? Is it going to grow slower? Is that going to affect my retirement, right? My money not growing as fast as it should? And it's hard to know, right? It just depends what those companies do here in the next 30, 40 years, right? If I had to guess, it probably wouldn't make a huge difference. And there's big, investment folks that agree with that. They say it probably won't affect your returns, probably not. The big thing that I always kind of look at is, hey, you want diversification, right? That's one of the biggest things in investing. And the TSP's done a great job. Hey, we're going to invest in a bunch of stuff. You invest in the C fund, no problem. We're going to put you in 500 of these great companies, right? But if you start just kind of pulling companies out, say, hey, we don't like that, we don't like that, then you just lose that. You lose diversification, right? So is it the end of the world? No, I'd still invest in the TSP, but I think it's just kind of jumping into a direction where it does start kind of getting dangerous, right? To losing options. So there's that, I guess, on the fossil fuel side. And like you mentioned, the China, it becomes very political very, very quickly. Right now, the I fund is, they are investing in Hong Kong. They don't actually, the I fund doesn't invest in the rest of China as it stands today. If, there has been talks about the TSP coming up with a new fund with emerging markets, which that would include the rest of China and things like that. So this sort of bill and law would definitely really stop that from happening, right? And that's kind of one of the main advantages that people in IRAs and sometimes 401ks have, is they can invest in emerging markets and things like that, that TSP account holders right now just can't. They don't have access to that. The I fund has some good options. It's not emerging markets by any means. So I know that was a lot of thoughts, and those were just kind of my broad thoughts on that. So hopefully that gives some context to kind of what I'm thinking on some of this stuff. So,
well, sort of, you mentioned diversification, with regards to the TSP. To that end, should this change the way that feds who are investing in the TSP, or TSP investors, in general, retirees, as well? Does this change their strategy with regards to diversification within and without the thrift savings plan?
Yeah, we'll have to actually see how this legislation settles. Maybe it won't go through at all. Maybe it will, right? It's really, I don't know. I don't know. And if it settles as it's being talked about, then yeah, there'll be less options, and potentially it'll push more TSP folks, maybe when they retire, whatever, into other options. When they have an IRA, whatever it is, push them out somewhere else where they can have more options. As it stands today, though, with the changes I saw, I say, hey, even with that, I would stay in the TSP. The TSP still does a great job at giving you some great options. The fees are really low. It still is the best place to be. You get a match, as a federal employee. It's still very, very hard to beat. Now, if things keep changing, it may start pushing some people out that really want that diversification that you might not get in the future. But as it stands today, if I was a listener here, I'd say, okay, as it stands today, I would continue investing, right? Stay diversified amongst the 5 funds, right? You definitely want that diversification, and do your best. And if things get more dramatic in the next, years, that may be a different conversation. But as of now, I would stay put, just to keep it simple for federal employees, for sure.
For sure. Now, you're not a fortune teller, nor are you in the business of prognosticating about Congress, but do you think, just from your perspective as a as someone involved with the TSP and an expertise in this side of things, is this likely? Are either of these likely to go forward as far as the TSP shifting?
It's hard to know. Again, I think regardless of whether this specifically goes through, I think it kind of shows the direction we're leaning, right? As lawmakers and as a country, right? So I think for me, regardless of it happens to be these bills that are being talked about now or in the future, I think that's kind of where it's going. It's just a matter of when, and we'll see. I mean, with, let's say, fossil fuels, right? I think over time, those companies are just going to get smaller and smaller, just because as a whole, the world is trying to go more green, right? More eco. Are they going to ever be gone? I doubt it, right? So I think over time, things will naturally move that way. It's just a matter of legislation tries to push it faster than it naturally would. So yeah, no, I wish I could, be the fortune teller and say, yes, it's going to pass, Ross, but it's hard to know. It's hard to know. And I, most of my time is spent with working with clients and digging in and helping them. And so, while I do keep up with current events, I don't diagnose this stuff too bad, because as you know, only so much actually ends up happening. And so it's just kind of a balancing act of staying current, but also not getting too worked up over things that may not happen. So,
well, you mentioned your clients. Have they had any concerns about this stuff?
There always is, right? Especially when changes are happening. It's like, okay, what does this mean for me, right? And I think as a summary, and I think there's been this talk before, right? This is not new. I mean, this stuff has happened, right? So I think it's good perspective for all of us. Hey, it's not the end of the world, right? Keep investing. The TSP is still a great tool and has built wealth for just thousands and thousands and millions of federal employees, right? So keep using it, keep sticking to the basics, and don't let kind of these small details mess up with what you're trying to do. And will it make some changes potentially in the future, or these laws make some changes? Yeah, it very well might, but stick to the basics, keep saving, keep investing, doing these things, and you're going to be okay. I think is the bottom line. For the average listener, I think that's what we need to take away is like, hey, it can get scary. There's going to be changes. Yes, do the best you can, keep saving, do your best, and things will work out. So.
Okay, so we'll end on this, just sort of wrapping a bow on it to a certain extent. Again, in your role, sort of advising people and following this stuff, does this sort of thing frustrate you, or does it? Generally, what do you think about? Certainly, in the case, particularly of the China conversation, I can say, as my fortune telling role, that it doesn't have a lot of chance of moving. So,
right.
Does this kind of political wrangling frustrate you to reflect on, again, this sort of aggressively apolitical TSP?
Yeah, no, I think it does. I think obviously the TSP is the biggest plan of its type in the world. It's huge, right? And so it makes a big difference of where that money gets pushed around, right? It makes a big difference. But my hope is that the TSP board and all the people that make decisions that affect it will look at, okay, who is the TSP for? It's for federal employees who are saving for retirement. And what is the best thing for them? Right? How do we help them save for retirement and be better prepared for retirement as we possibly can? And I think the TSP has done an exceptionally great job at that up to this point. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it kind of does. When things start getting political and where you take out, okay, what's best for the actual end user, the participant, right? The person that's using this to save for retirement, right? I think that hopefully should be the focus. And I think it still is. I don't think we've lost that completely. But yeah, no, I agree. It can be frustrating to kind of see the political side kind of being pushed into this, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know our listeners are constantly complaining about political wrangling affecting their jobs, and they just want to do the work. And I think the TSP is an extension of that, in the sense that another aspect of their livelihoods and their financial future is now being kind of used as a political football in these somewhat silly ways. But
right.
We'll see. Certainly, like I said, from part of it, it doesn't seem like there will be a ton of change on it for the future. Hopefully not. And Alan, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show is produced by Adam Butler and hosted by me, Ross John Fortune. We want to thank GovExec contributor Dallin Hawes for joining the program. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else you get podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter @govexec. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.